So we're talking about translations of functions, and there were 3 graphs in the first section that you did. Y equals x squared, which is this one. And you also had y equals x squared plus 1, which is this one. And then the third one was y equals x squared minus 5. And that's what the graph should look like. You probably can't see them really well from where you're sitting, but they're all parabolas. They're all the same shape and the same size, but there are some differences about them. And I'm just going to skip through to the important part, which is this. The graph of y equals f of x plus k is congruent to the graph of y equals f of x. So they're the same shape and the same size. They're congruent. But here's what's different. When k is greater than 0, the function, and yours said is translated, and can you fill in the blank? What did you put in that blank? The function is translated up k units. So if you take your function f of x and you add a positive number to it, it's going to move up. So the graph still looks the same shape, same size, but it's just slid up. And it moves up k units. So whatever k was, that's how far up it goes. So for y equals x squared plus 1, it moved up 1 unit. And then when k is less than 0, the function is translated down k units, right. That's basically what you had to get out of that first part. There's also, this is a mapping rule, x, y maps to, change that, x, y maps to, we need to say how do the x values change when you add a k value, and how do the y values change? X stays the same, so it's just x, but the y value, you add k to it. So it's x and y plus k. Sometimes k is negative, so you're really subtracting, right, when you're adding a negative number. But the mapping rule is x and y plus k. So now we should be able to make predictions about graphs with vertical translations. What will the following graph look like? Y equals f of x plus 5. What will that graph look like? This graph, f of x plus 5, will be congruent to f of x. So what that means is whatever f of x was, it's going to be the same size and same shape, but translate it up 5 units. So on your sheet, you had to say what y equals the absolute value of x plus 2 will look like. Well, it's going to be congruent to the absolute value of x, but moved up 2. Y equals the square root of x minus 3 is going to be congruent to the square root of x, but translate it down 3 units. It's always just congruent to the parent function and then moved up or down. What will the coordinates of each of the points on f of x be after it's transformed is the other thing it asks you here. So 1, 5 is a point on f of x. What will that point translate to when we change it to f of x plus 5? That's what it's asking. And this is where that mapping rule comes in. The mapping rule for this one would be x, y maps to x and y plus 5. You don't necessarily need a mapping rule for this one because it's pretty straightforward. But once you get a whole bunch of transformations put together, the mapping rule I find really helps. So we're going to get used to using it for these simple ones. So we're looking at where is this 0.15 going to move to? The mapping rule is xy maps to x and y plus 5. What that means is x stays the same, so this is going to move to 1, but y gets 5 added to it. So it moves to 1 and 10. 2 and negative 3, well, it says that x stays the same, so it's still 2, but y has 5 added to it, so that changes to 2. Negative 3 plus 2. Sorry, negative 3 plus 5 equals 2. So that's where those points, specific points, transform to. Here you were doing a different type of translation. You started out with this function y equals the absolute value of x. And if you couldn't remember what that looks like, you could graph it on your calculator. And then we did two other ones. Y equals the absolute value of x plus 2. And y equals the absolute value of x minus 5. Can you find these on your sheet? So then we need to look at what's happening to these graphs. So instead of it translating up and down, it's translating left and right. The graph of y equals f of x minus h is congruent to the graph of y equals f of x. So still the same size and same shape. When h is greater than 0, what happens to the graph? It goes to the left. Is translated how many units? H units to the left. And when h is less than 0, the function is translated h units to the right. I don't think this is right. Okay, we changed it. Does this make more sense this way? When h is greater than 0, so this is the one, x minus 5. This is where h is greater than 0, right? Because it's x minus h. This one's subtracting 5. It's translated to the right. When h is less than 0, it's translated to the left. This x plus 2, what's the h value? Negative 2. We're subtracting negative 2 to get a plus 2, and that's translated to the left. So I think this is the way it should be. So that's the mapping rule. xy maps to x plus h and y, but what you need to remember is that the h switches signs from what it looks like in the equation because it is subtracting h. So now we should be able to make some predictions. What will the following graph look like? Y equals f of x plus 4. What will this graph look like? This one will be congruent to y equals f of x and translated 4 units to the left. If it's f of x plus 4. What's the difference between that y equals f of x plus 4 and this one? Y equals f of x plus 4. Yeah, that one, this one is going to go up. This one over here is going to go to the left. It depends on where the plus 4 is. If it's with the x, then it's affecting the x, which means it's moving left or right. If it's not, it's outside of the f of x, it's affecting the whole function. So the function value, remember, is the y value. So it's affecting the whole function and it's moving up or down. And what will the coordinates of each of these points be after it's transformed? So what was that mapping rule again? X, Y maps to, what did we say it was? X plus H and Y. So if we're looking at this function, y equals f of x plus 4, what's the h value? H is equal to -4. So this is going to be x minus 4. 3 minus 4 is -1. And y stays the same as -6. And then 2, 7. X plus h. H is -4. 2 minus 4 is -2. And 7.